It was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of their relationship. After spending the evening celebrating their first anniversary at a local pub, 21-year-old Chrissy Everard Hickson and her boyfriend returned to the flat they shared on Greenhill Lane in Riddings, Derbyshire. Just after 1:20 a.m. a neighbor downstairs heard several loud, heavy bangs followed by complete silence. Those sounds marked the beginning of a murder investigation that would end with a jury reaching a verdict in less than 2 hours. This is the story of Chrissy Everard Hickson, how an ordinary anniversary turned into tragedy, and why the man she trusted most was ultimately convicted of taking her life. Chrissy, known to family and friends simply as Chrissy, was a vibrant 21-year-old from Derbyshire. She was one of 4 daughters born to Dawn Hickson and Sean Everard. Her loved ones described her as kind, cheerful, compassionate, and full of life. She loved animals, music, and art, and had a warm personality that made people feel comfortable around her. Though shy when meeting new people, she quickly became outgoing once she felt at ease. By early 2024, Chrissy had reached an exciting milestone in her life. She had moved in with her boyfriend, 30-year-old Kain Tailby, and the couple had been living together for about a year. Tailby worked as a bakery employee, and from the outside, their relationship appeared normal. According to Derbyshire police, there had never been any reports of domestic violence or previous incidents involving the couple. There were no warning signs on record, making what happened next even more shocking. On February 17, 2024, the couple celebrated their 1-year anniversary by spending the evening together at a local pub. After returning home in the early hours of February 18, an argument broke out in their kitchen. Prosecutors later told the court that Chrissy confronted Tailby over allegations that he had been unfaithful. Reports also suggested Tailby had already been in a bad mood earlier that day over a minor issue involving one of their cats. During the heated argument, court evidence indicated that Chrissy slapped Tailby once across the face. What happened next was completely disproportionate. According to the prosecution, Tailby tackled Chrissy to the kitchen floor, pinned her down, grabbed her by the neck, and repeatedly slammed her head against the hard floor around 5 or 6 times. The downstairs neighbor later told investigators they heard several powerful impacts coming through the ceiling before everything suddenly went quiet. That testimony would become one of the most important pieces of evidence during the trial. After the assault, Chrissy was left unconscious and bleeding from one ear, a serious warning sign of catastrophic head trauma. Instead of immediately explaining what had happened, Tailby moved her into the bathtub, later claiming he was trying to wash the blood from her body. At 1:20 a.m. he finally called emergency services requesting both police and an ambulance. However, during the call, he dramatically downplayed the violence. He described the incident as nothing more than pushing and shoving that had become a bit physical. He even suggested he wasn't sure whether Chrissy had hit her head. By the time police and paramedics arrived, they discovered a very different scene. Chrissy had suffered multiple skull fractures and a devastating traumatic brain injury. She was rushed to hospital in critical condition, while Tailby was arrested at the scene on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm. Doctors quickly realized her injuries were likely unsurvivable, and she was placed on life support as her family faced the heartbreaking reality that recovery was becoming impossible. On February 20, 2024, while Chrissy remained on life support, Kain Tailby was formally charged with attempted murder. At that point, doctors were still fighting to save her life, although the outlook was grim. The following day, he appeared before Southern Derbyshire Magistrates Court and was remanded into custody. For 5 heartbreaking days, Chrissy's family waited, hoping for a miracle that never came. Medical specialists determined that the damage to her brain was beyond recovery. Faced with an unimaginable decision, her family agreed to withdraw life support. In the early hours of February 23, 2024, Chrissy Everard Hickson died at just 21 years old. Amid their grief, her family made one final act of generosity. They chose to donate her organs, a decision that reportedly went on to save the lives of 5 people. With her death confirmed, prosecutors upgraded the charge against Tailby from attempted murder to murder. On March 15, 2024, Tailby appeared at Derby Crown Court, and pleaded not guilty to murder. However, through his legal team, he offered to admit responsibility for manslaughter, claiming he never intended to kill Chrissy or cause her serious harm. The Crown Prosecution Service rejected that plea. Senior Crown Prosecutor Emma Hodgson stated that the attack involved sustained and extreme violence. Prosecutors argued that repeatedly striking someone's head against the hard floor clearly demonstrated an intention to cause really serious injury, which under English law is enough to support a murder conviction. The case proceeded to trial at Derby Crown Court in March 2025. Prosecutors presented forensic evidence, witness testimony, and Tailby's own statements to show that the attack was deliberate and prolonged. The defense focused on one central argument. Lawyers claimed the fatal injury may have occurred when Chrissy first fell to the floor during the tackle. They argued that the repeated blows afterward did not necessarily cause her death or prove Tailby intended to inflict serious harm. The prosecution strongly disputed that claim. Medical experts testified that Chrissy suffered multiple skull fractures, injuries that were consistent with repeated forceful impacts rather than a single accidental fall. Blood spatter found throughout the kitchen also supported the conclusion that the assault continued after she was taken to the floor. Perhaps the strongest evidence came from the downstairs neighbor. The witness described hearing several loud bangs through the ceiling, matching almost exactly what Tailby later admitted during police interviews. During questioning, Tailby acknowledged grabbing Chrissy, taking her to the floor, and banging her head against the kitchen floor 5 or 6 times. That admission directly contradicted the version of events he gave during his 999 emergency call, where he described the incident as little more than pushing and shoving. With the medical evidence, forensic findings, independent witness testimony, and Tailby's own confession all pointing in the same direction, prosecutors argued there could be little doubt about what had happened inside the flat that night. After hearing over a week of testimony, the jury retired to consider its verdict. It took them less than 2 hours to reach a unanimous decision. On March 26, 2025, Kain Tailby was found guilty of murdering Chrissy Everard Hickson. 2 days later, he returned to Derby Crown Court for sentencing. Judge Sean Smith Casey described the killing as an explosive act of anger and violence that represented a profound betrayal of trust. Chrissy had every right to feel safe in her own home, yet the person closest to her became the greatest threat to her life. Although the judge said he did not believe Tailby was an inherently evil man, he made it clear that this did nothing to lessen the seriousness of the crime. Whatever emotions Tailby had experienced that night, they could never justify the brutal violence he inflicted. The court sentenced Tailby to life imprisonment. The Crown Prosecution Service confirmed he must serve a minimum of 18 years before becoming eligible to apply for parole. Because he had already spent time in custody awaiting trial, Derbyshire police calculated that he would not even be considered for release until he had completed at least 16 years and 329 days behind bars. Even after serving that minimum term, release is not automatic. Any future release would depend entirely on the parole board deciding that he no longer poses a danger to the public. Following the sentencing, Detective Constable Jonathan Reeves praised the determination shown by Chrissy's family throughout the investigation and trial. He said Tailby had betrayed the trust and love Chrissy should have been able to expect from her partner. Reeves also reflected on the future that had been stolen from a young woman whose life had only just begun. One of the most emotional moments in court came from Chrissy's mother, Dawn Hickson. Despite losing her daughter in such a horrific way, she chose to forgive Kain Tailby. Judge Smith described her decision as an extraordinary act of compassion. Her forgiveness did not excuse the crime or lessen Tailby's responsibility. Instead, it reflected one grieving mother's personal decision to free herself from hatred while continuing to mourn the daughter she had lost forever. Chrissy's story would not end with the sentencing. Almost 1 year after her death, during an International Women's Day debate in the House of Lords, her name was read aloud as part of the femicide census, a record honoring women and girls across the United Kingdom who were killed by men. Her case became another painful reminder of the devastating impact of domestic violence and intimate partner homicide. Behind every statistic is a real person. For Chrissy, that person was a 21-year-old woman who loved animals, music, and art, and who had been building a future with someone she believed she could trust. Instead, an anniversary that should have celebrated love became the final night of her life. From a legal standpoint, the trial centered on one key question: did Kain Tailby intend to kill Chrissy, or at least intend to cause her serious bodily harm? Under English law, prosecutors do not have to prove that a defendant specifically wanted the victim to die. If they intentionally inflict really serious harm and the victim dies, that is enough to support a murder conviction. The defense argued that Chrissy's fatal injury may have occurred when she first hit the floor during the tackle, suggesting the repeated blows afterward did not necessarily cause her death. Their goal was to convince the jury that this was manslaughter rather than murder. The prosecution dismantled that argument using three powerful pieces of evidence. First, medical experts found multiple skull fractures consistent with repeated forceful impacts rather than a single accidental fall. Second, blood spatter evidence from the kitchen supported the reconstruction of a sustained assault instead of one isolated incident. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the downstairs neighbor reported hearing several loud impacts through the ceiling. That testimony matched Tailby's later admission that he had slammed Chrissy's head against the floor 5 or 6 times. When forensic evidence, an independent witness, and the defendant's own confession all pointed to the same sequence of events, the prosecution's case became overwhelming. The jury's unanimous verdict after less than 2 hours reflected just how convincing that evidence was. Psychological analysis. Although no clinical diagnosis was ever made, Tailby's actions followed a pattern often seen in cases of intimate partner violence. The first was extreme escalation. A single slap was met with overwhelming violence that went far beyond any reasonable response. The second was minimization. During the 999 call, Tailby described the attack as simple pushing and shoving, language that dramatically understated the severity of Chrissy's injuries. The third was blame shifting. By presenting the incident as a mutual confrontation, he attempted to reduce his own responsibility for what had happened. Finally, his story changed over time. His initial explanation was vague and misleading, but as investigators gathered evidence, he eventually admitted to repeatedly striking Chrissy's head against the floor. That progression is often seen when physical evidence leaves little room for denial. Another detail highlighted during the trial was that Tailby had reportedly been irritated throughout the day over minor issues before the argument even began. While those frustrations did not excuse his actions, they illustrated how accumulated anger can suddenly erupt in a moment of violence against someone closest to the offender. A bigger picture. Chrissy's murder became part of a wider conversation about violence against women in the United Kingdom. Her name was added to the femicide census, which documents women killed by men, most often by current or former partners. One of the most sobering aspects of the case was that there had been no previous police reports, no documented history of domestic abuse, and no official warning signs before the attack. Her case demonstrates that the absence of police involvement does not always mean a relationship is free from danger. Even in the midst of unimaginable grief, Chrissy's family made the selfless decision to donate her organs, a gift that reportedly saved 5 lives. It became a lasting legacy of hope born from an unbearable loss. Chrissy Everard Hickson was only 21 years old. She loved animals, music, and art, and those closest to her remembered her for her kindness, compassion, and joyful spirit. Her life ended far too soon, but her story continues to remind people of the devastating consequences of domestic violence, and the importance of recognizing its warning signs. If this case touched you, take a moment to remember Chrissy, not simply as another victim, but as a young woman whose future was stolen by someone she trusted most.